Morning, everybody. Uh, Hope your week is going well so far. This morning, posting another Wired article just seems to be the trend for the past couple of days. They've got some great reporting. This Wired article is talking about big data and how big data could undermine COVID. Historically, what we've been talking about is we've been talking a lot of personal data, a lot of personal tracking. And we've been really focused on is your personal privacy with this. But what is also happening throughout all of this as well is that we're collecting mass amounts of data. So we collect mass amounts of data, and as the amount of data is collected, it's being used to understand trends in how diseases are spread. It's used to understand trends in the kinds of people who are acquiring this disease. Is it affecting more men than women? Is it affecting older people? Is it affecting younger people? I have seen countless articles about this. And what it really boils down to is like you have to know the source of your data, and you have to understand how that could potentially impact the research that you're doing. So while I'm a big proponent of personal privacy, right, and making sure that you have the choice, if I choose to share my data because I think it'll help the greater good, I'm all for that. Like, you should just have the choice to choose whether or not you want to do that. I also am a big fan of transparency. If I'm going to share my data, I really want to know how long you're going to use it, what are you going to use it for. I want to make sure that I'm doing greater good, I'm doing more good than harm, that my data isn't going to be used in a negative way, right? And so this particular article and what we're talking about, what I'm really focused on today, is focused on the idea that big data can often skew what you expect results to be. So I see that, in this article, and I've actually looked up the history of other infectious diseases, right, that have spread. So there was Ebola, and Ebola that hit Sierra Leone and Africa fairly badly. And what they did is they actually pulled phone records to help track what the spread was going to be, because they thought that that was a good way to take data that they could aggregate together and really understand how this disease was spreading and how they could better fight it. And now, a decade plus later, what they've learned is, as they look back, that the disease wasn't spread the way that they had thought it was at the time, because they hadn't quite taken into account what like some of the data skews the data skew that they had seen, right? When you have aggregate data, depending on the data source and where that data comes from, and also, what's included in that data, when you're trending it, then it could potentially skew where you expect to be. So I think this really boils down to one of the other principles that we think about is data ownership. When we have people who are willing to trust you and trust your company, they're willing to give you their data in exchange for something else, or in exchange just to do good, the right thing for the greater good, then you actually are going to have more accurate data. You're going to have more precise data, but then also you'll understand too what that true data source is and how it could potentially be skewed. So I have I've heard this story multiple times from multiple friends, right? In the advertising and in the data industry in general, that they'll pull a data set and they'll be like, yeah, so I would have thought that this product, should have skewed younger, right? Like, I would have thought for sure that that this product, it seems a natural fit for people in their 20s and 30s, but it's showing up that it over indexes for people who are 40 plus or 50 plus. And so I'm really confused as to why this is happening. So I mean, like, I would think that if you're buying, and here's a good example of this, if you're buying children's clothes, that probably you're going to be in your 20s and 30s if you're buying clothes for 2 and 3 and 4-year-olds. But instead, the data is showing that it's actually, this product, these children's clothes are being purchased by people in their 50s and 60s. And, I've heard conversation after conversation like this, where what happens is it's not that the data is inaccurate, it's that the data set itself skews older. So the data set that's been collected actually skews older And that's why it's over indexing for people who are indeed older. So you have to know the source of your data. You have to know how accurate it is. And you really, in order to actually make sure you're making the right decisions. And so this is a really great Wired article that talks a little bit about some of the downsides of using things like big data, and even could even be, detrimental for things like contact tracing, for if you're going to use data from that, because if that, say, it skews younger, all of a sudden, if you're going to use that data for more than it was actually intended to be used for, you could say that, oh, COVID doesn't actually affect older people as much anymore. It actually impacts younger people more. And I think the more that we see articles come out about this is the more that we're going to see, as we have a little bit of distance from this and we've taken some time to process this, we're going to go back and examine what those data sources actually were and find out that the devil really is in the details. Your data sources matter, and I hope so. Something to consider: data accuracy. What are your data sources? What makes up your data sources, and how might that skew your results? Something to always keep in mind. So I hope that you guys are having a great week, and I look forward to talking to you tomorrow.